It's me. Hi. What's up everyone? It's Emily. Welcome back to my channel, and today I will be giving you 13 book recs based off of the new Taylor Swift album, Midnights. I grew up listening to Taylor Swift. She was one of my very first pop music country artists that I loved and owned full albums of. I owned most of her albums growing up. And I fell out of listening to her music in high school because it was no longer cool to like Taylor Swift, and honestly it like absolutely destroys my soul that is something that happened. And so over the past couple of years, I've been rekindling that love for her, and I'm so glad I did. And with her new album out, I thought I should do some book recs based off of it. I love the new album. I love the sound. I love that it's so different, but it's also an amalgamation of everything that she's done in the past. I also love how raw and truthful it is. We deal with some pretty dark themes in it, and so I thought, I would just give you guys some recommendations, and yeah, let's stop talking, let's get to it. I'm gonna go with the obvious one first, and for me it's gonna be The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, because one, midnight, night sky, we've got like the stars, the constellation thing that we come back to, but I also think that just the overall essence of this book is very much Taylor Swift's Midnights. This book is about loneliness and finding someone who can match that loneliness. Also just reflecting on the life choices you made. I mean, the whole thing with Addie LaRue is that she's basically immortal, right? But like no one can remember her the second that they don't see her anymore. The fact of having like infinite time to reflect on that choice and, staying up at night, all those things. This book just really screams this album to me in a lot of ways. Next one I'm gonna say is The Wicker King, and this is kind of in a similar vein. This is like the darker like mental illness, anxiety, depression side of this album, where we have these two boys and one of them is seeing creatures from this kind of like parallel world like leaking into our dimension, and it deals a lot with mental illness, and it's super duper dark. What I love about this book is the pages like get darker and darker as it progresses. So if you can buy this one in a physical copy, I highly recommend that over the ebook, because it is an experience to read this book. Also, it was a super quick read, but again, this one is mainly like the vibes of talking about like anti-hero vigilante shit, like that essence side of her album. Speaking of vigilante shit, if we're talking about women revenge stories, I'm going with Iron Widow. This one is all about revenge, taking no shit from men, and just doing what you need to do in this patriarchal society. Honestly, whenever anyone is looking for a revenge story with like pure female rage, I always tell them about this book. So definitely check that one out if you're looking for something more on that spectrum. In a similar vein, and this is a book that you might not have heard of before, I'm gonna talk about The Heartbeat of a Million Dreams. This is gonna come up in my ARC/book review wrap up later in I think early November. This is a sci-fi novella where Mars has two different like parallel worlds on top of itself, and there are these people who can break apart their atoms and I don't know, it's so crazy. It's a futuristic sci-fi novel, but first of all, it's queer and the main character is neurodivergent. Like, that should be enough. It's also, I don't want to say like revenge, it's kind of like a coming into your own story, and also like finding the person who sees all of your bad parts and loves you anyway. It was so beautiful, and this one definitely almost feels like Sweet Nothing, but with like the undercurrent of Midnight Rain. I don't know, so that's kind of what I get from this book. It is so beautiful. It's a novella. It's like 160 pages or something, and I think every single person needs to read it. It's just heartbreaking and so beautiful, and not enough people have read it, so everyone needs to go read this book. I would 100% recommend this to anyone who loves the like essence of this album. My other sort of sci-fi rec on this is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This book gives me you're on your own kid kind of feelings, because the main character, I think her name is Spensa if I'm remembering correctly, her dad does something really horrible, and she has to kind of live with the fact that everyone automatically hates her because of what he did. And she spends most of the book trying to prove herself and being better than everyone else and thinking ahead and only thinking about herself, because that's what she's had to do her whole life. And everyone knows who she is, but they don't know who she really is. And I think that that's also something that is a big theme on this album. And first of all, this book is incredible and everyone should read it. But beyond that, it's a beautiful story, and Spensa is one of my favorite main characters of all time. And if you are into the you're on your own kid anti-hero sort of vibe on this album, this is definitely a good one. Same with the like self-loathing anti-hero is White Smoke, where this book is a horror novel, and it's been coined as The Haunting of Hill House meets Get Out. So we've got a little bit of paranormal stuff going on here, but our main character Marigold has to deal with a lot of self-loathing. She's running away from her past and the mistakes that she made before, and like having to deal with these trust issues that she's developed. And she definitely has a lot of sleepless nights in this book. Yeah, like talking about like being haunted by your past and you're like feeling haunted in the present. This is definitely a book for people who I think are like hurting and need to heal, but like it's a horror book, so like we get some of that healing, but there's definitely a lot more happening with that as well. But this book is so beautiful, honestly, and it is also terrifying. So the next one I would recommend is Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine, and this book deals with a 30-year-old named Eleanor, and she has some quirks. I definitely think it would be within the realm of reason to say that she's very neurodivergent. She wears the same clothes every day. She never takes any sick days at work. She just loves her routine, all those good things. And then one day she meets this guy named Raymond, and he is like everything that she's not. This book deals a lot with depression and trauma, and especially childhood trauma. And I definitely think, again, this is kind of like a you're on your own kid sort of a deal. Maybe a little bit of anti-hero kind of feelings in there. And she also talks about like fantasizing about like a relationship that isn't real, like in her mind it is. So I definitely think this book is not talked about enough, first of all, but like it definitely deals with some like heavier things with like alcoholism, self-deprivation, and trauma, obviously. But this one is definitely one of those books that you just like you end up thinking about late at night, especially if you relate to Eleanor, and it's just really beautiful, and it's a great book. The next one I want to talk about is Looking for Alaska. Now I know that this is like peak John Green, like what, like 2012 or something like that, when he was really big. And this book has gotten a lot of flack for like manic pixie dream girl stuff, but I would just like to say I do not think that that is true. And John Green got a lot of hate that was really undeserved. And he's actually talked about this book pretty recently in a TikTok. And what he said like really struck me. And he talks about how he's like, people say that Alaska is a manic pixie dream girl, but it's literally the story of the book is the opposite of that. So I don't know like where people are getting this from, which is completely true. Like how some people are just people like dealing with stuff, and we end up romanticizing them in our heads, and how like that's just not how they are. Definitely, again, kind of dealing with depression, loss, all of these things, all of those dark feelings, and again, just like that loneliness of sitting alone in your room at midnight and just reflecting on all the choices that you made. And I don't know, this book I just definitely think fits in with that whole theme. Speaking of loneliness, I want to talk about A Curse So Dark and Lonely. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where the main character is named Harper, and she has cerebral palsy, and she is kind of whisked away into this like magical realm where there is a prince and a beast, and you know, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I think you can kind of go from there. I really loved this book. Again, kind of am thinking this is very much Midnight Rain-y, maybe Labyrinth-y, and definitely Ren has some anti-hero stuff happening in his mind. So I loved this book. If you're into fairy tale retellings and you haven't read this one, I so recommend it. I thought it was beautifully done. I think that it stays so true to its roots as Beauty and the Beast while still making it completely its own. And it's a beautiful book, and it's a trilogy. I haven't read the third one yet, but I loved the book. Next book I'm going to talk about is Normal People, and I know that this book is like beloved on Book Talk and BookTube and everything. This book was not for me. I'm going to preface with that. However, I know that this book really resonates with a lot of people, and a lot of people really love this book, because if y'all want to talk about a toxic relationship over years and years and years and like feeling like you can't let that person go or whatever, like this book is for you. Again, dealing with trauma and abuse and alcoholism, all those things. I wanted like a little bit of a mix in here of like, I have some like YA and fantasy and whatever, and I definitely thought like in terms of contemporary, this is a good one for this album. There were a lot of things I didn't love about this book, but I know that it has its audience, and I definitely couldn't really make this list without it, because I do think that it has its place in this sort of mystical genre-y Midnights album that we've got happening. Okay, moving on to some like less depression books and more like lighter-hearted books. First, I want to talk about She Gets the Girl. It feels like Maroon to me, and Question. Both of them are moving on or trying to get back into these past relationships. One character has been in love with this girl from a distance for a long time, and then the other one is trying to prove to her kind of ex/current girlfriend that she doesn't only care about herself. And so then they help each other. So this girl is helping the other one get the crush of her dreams so that she can impress her girlfriend/kind of ex-girlfriend. And both of them don't really know like where the future is heading. So I think I get Maroon Question vibes from this, and I absolutely adored this book. It has a roller skating rink date scene in it, and just like it's set on a college campus. So I think it's a good representation of the softer, more in love side of this album. The next book on my list is Loveless by Alice Oseman. This book made me sob. This is another book that takes place on a college campus where our main character, Georgia, is kind of questioning her sexuality because she doesn't feel sexual attraction or any attraction whatsoever, and she just wants to fit in and feel normal like all of her friends do here at college. And there are a lot of sleepless nights in this book where Georgia is just trying to figure out her feelings and why she's different and what that means for her. Also self-acceptance, and there's also a lot of self-loathing. So again, like that same kind of questioning who you are and like wanting to fit in and just figuring out what that means for you. And this book is so good. I sobbed reading it. So yeah, this one, so good. Definitely fits in this whole theme that I've got going on here. And then the last book I'm gonna put on my 13 books for Taylor Swift's Midnights album is If This Gets Out. This is a book about a boy band, of all things, and we read this for the Bi Book Club, and I wasn't sure I was going to super duper love it, but I ended up really enjoying it. This book to me is Lavender Hayes, 100%, where these two boys in the boy band, there's I think 4 guys total, one of them is gay and the other one is questioning his sexuality. And I like this because it deals with that whole idea of fame that Taylor talks about on the album, but then also them wanting to be in love and stay in that lavender haze of being in love together without everyone judging them and putting eyes on them and putting a spotlight on their relationship. And so I think this book definitely has a lot of things within this album mixed into it as well. So this is definitely one that I would recommend if you're looking for a queer romance in a boy band. I just thought that concept was so crazy to me, and then I absolutely loved it when it came down to it. And there you have it. Those are my 13 book recommendations that for me give the same essence of Midnights by Taylor Swift. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you could give my channel a like and subscribe, it really helps me out a lot. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.